Hi, this is Igor Smirnov, and I'm very glad to welcome you in this new video lesson called How to Arrest a Bishop. In this video, I'm going to show you one little bit unknown way for restricting opponent's bishop. What I mean here is this. Today every chess player knows about a bad bishop, which means that an opponent's bishop is restricted by his pawn chain. It happens in French defense, for example. This is a common thing and everybody is familiar with that. In this lesson, I'd like to show you another idea. First, let's have a closer look at a bishop. For example, at the black's light-squared bishop on c8. Let's think how can black develop it. Well, at first sight it looks like black has plenty of various possibilities. But nevertheless, let's think more specifically. Okay, first of all, most probably black will need to move the d pawn, perhaps to d5. And it will look like this. Okay, what will black do after that? One idea is to fiat shadow this bishop, so to play b6 and bishop b7. Although this is certainly possible, but we can see that the bishop is still passive. The black's own pawn onto d5 closes its diagonal. Therefore, this is not a very good option. Now let's try to find something better. Another idea is to develop the bishop on d7. Still, it doesn't look so great. First of all, in most cases the bishop d7 controls only one diagonal c8 h3. And taking this into account, we can see that there is no great difference between a position of the black's bishop onto d7 or onto c8, because it still controls the same squares. Secondly, the black's bishop on d7 hampers the normal movement of other black's pieces like queen d8, knight b8, and so on. Thus we will reject the possibility of developing the bishop to d7 also. Next option is to place this bishop to e6. It will look like this. Here we can see that this bishop looks like a tall pawn, so it's kind of a bad bishop, and black's own pawn on f7 and d5 limit an activity of this bishop. So it's unlikely that black will enjoy this situation. Finally, we can come to the conclusion that the black's light-squared bishop has only two good squares to be placed on. These are the f5 and g4 squares. Well, two options is not too much, and white may try to eliminate both of these possibilities. White has an obvious way to take control over the g4 square. It's just enough to play h3 or maybe f3. As for the f5 square, white needs to place his light-squared bishop to d3. It will look like this. Now the black's similarly good bishop onto c8 has no prospects. You may like to remember this idea. A combination of the white's two moves bishop d3 and h3 keeps the black bishop c8 out of the game. Most chess players have seen this idea, but they do not use it to its full potential. So I hope that after a study of this lesson, you'll be able to get the greatest benefit out of this idea. By the way, this idea works in many different openings, and moreover, in some variations, this is the key idea for the whole system. Okay, so now let's see how you can use this trick in your practice. Now I will quickly show you different openings where you can apply this trick and restrict opponent's bishop. For instance, it works against Caro-Kann defense. After d4 and d5, you can go to exchange variation. And then after bishop d3, that'll be a Rubinstein variation, where this idea works perfectly. On the next move, white can play h3, and here is the position which we analyzed previously. A combination of the white's moves bishop d3 and h3. Also, please pay attention to the right order of moves. White needs to start from bishop d3 and only after that play h3. This is very important. If you try to start with h3 instead, black will be able to develop his bishop to f5, and the white's idea failed. And obviously white shouldn't develop the g1 knight too early, because after knight f3 black can very easily play bishop g4. That's why the order of moves is important here. You need to start with bishop d3, and right now both good squares for black, f5 and g4, are controlled by the white's pieces. And on the next move, if black goes something like knight f6 or something else, white can go h3, and now everything is done, everything is good. Okay, this was one example. There is another situation where you can use the same motif against Caro-Kann defense. In the exchanged variation with e takes d5, and then you can follow it by playing c4, which starts the Panov variation, and then in one of the main lines, which happens after these following moves, after c takes d5, black has obviously two options, knight takes d5 and e takes d5, and both of them are quite popular. And against the line e takes d5, white has little problem because it looks like the position is totally equal, completely symmetric, and white has no chances to get an advantage. Although it's quite right, white still can use our idea to hamper the black's task, and to not allow black to equalize the game so easily. As you can see, if white goes bishop d3 here in this position, black will reply bishop g4, and then the white's idea failed. Therefore, white should start with h3, and only on the next move, when black makes castling or something else, white will develop the light squared bishop to d3. Here you may be thinking, but what if black develops the bishop to f5 right away? Yeah, that's right, black can do this, but here white can use the black's centralized king and play bishop b5 check, and this creates some tactical problems for black. Generally, black doesn't like to place the knight to d7. Here the knight has no prospects, the white's d4 pawn restricts its activity, and even if black moves this knight to b6 later on in the middle game, white will play b3, and that b6 knight will still be out of game. So the knight is misplaced here, and that's why black will probably prefer to place it on c6. And here white can continue attacking using the pin on the black's knight and go knight e5, maybe queen a4 on the next move, and at least white will be able to take on c6 and to create a weak pawn onto c6, onto a7, and to attack them in the middle game. Thus here it's not completely equal for black, and black still has some problems. Okay, let's move back. And if black doesn't like to go into this variation, if he decides to castle first, then white can go bishop d3 and get this clear position where black has some problems. As you can see, in the future black will have to develop his light squared bishop to e6, simply because he doesn't have much other options. The bishop will be passive onto e6, also it will close the e-line for black, thus white retains an advantage. There is one interesting variation against Petrov's defense, which you can use when you're playing white. After these common first moves, knight e5, d6 and knight takes e4, the main move here is d4, but you may try the move bishop d3. Now the knight is attacked. If black plays d5, white can play queen e2 and still create some problems for black. That's why most often black goes back knight f6. And after that white can play h3, and here's the position which we analyzed previously. Now the black's light squared bishop has no good squares forward. Although in this position, to be completely honest, we should admit that black can thin shadow the bishop to b7 and it will still be active. Anyway, I think that this variation is quite interesting and you may try to use it. In the future, white will castle, let's say in this variation. Next, white will play c3, Then after black's move like knight c6, bishop c2, you go d4, and you continue your development in a usual way, bishop g5, knight b to d2. You've got a good position, and at least you will create a little bit unknown situation where your opponent will have to think by himself and not just make book moves. Previously we've been talking about the black's light squared bishop c8. Of course, the same idea works for any other bishop as well. For example, some people, especially in blitz games, likes to play knight c3, and then after d5 they continue with with e4, sorry. So after the logical move d4 and knight e2, and then perhaps black goes e5, white plays knight g3. Here many people plays something like c5, but after that white will play knight f3, and if you go knight c6, white can develop his bishop on b5 or onto c4. In any case, the bishop stands very actively there, and white has quite good initiative position. Instead, black can use the idea which we discussed in this lesson. Let's make few moves back. Instead of natural move c5, as we already know, black needs to take control of the squares b5 and c4, and this will arrest the white's light squared bishop and keep it not very active. Thus, black may start from bishop e6, and after the white's move knight f3, black still should not go knight c6, which allows bishop b5, but play f6 instead. And in the future, if white tries bishop b5, black can just play c6, and the white's bishop will remain passive. Later on, black can go knight c6, bishop d6, knight e7, something like that, and black has quite a good position. If white tries to exchange his light squared bishop right now and play something like bishop b5, c6, and bishop a4, then okay, right now the bishop is standing on the edge, not very active, and also black has a few aggressive possibilities. Black may try to bring the b8 knight to a6 and c5 and attack this bishop, or black can try to play d3 and blockade the white's center and queen side. All in all, still black has quite good initiative position. There are many situations where you can restrain an opponent's bishop. In this lesson I've showed you just a few positions, while of course there are many other situations as well. This means that you'll definitely be able to apply this idea into practice. So I wish you good luck in your chess games, thanks for watching, and feel free to let your comments about this video. Have a good day, goodbye.